Welcome to the show for content creators building powerful online businesses. In this episode, I'm joined by Philippa Gamse, a digital marketing strategist with over 25 years of experience and more than 500 clients served across the globe. Philippa helps business owners hidden insights in their web analytics to grow their revenue and stop wasting resources. She's known for translating complex data into plain, actionable English, no-tech jargon. Today, she shares real-life stories and practical tips on how creators can use analytics to uncover new opportunities and make smarter decisions. Let's dive in. Can you tell us about how you got into digital marketing and analytics? Of all the things you could have picked, why digital marketing and analytics?
Well, I was kind of around since fairly on in the internet history, and analytics started to become available. So analytics was actually available before Google Analytics, which is what most people have heard of. But there were some programs before that, and one of them was made by a friend of mine, and I thought it was a brilliant program. It's called ClickTracks, and I just really caught my attention that the thing that's really interesting about web analytics is that you can tell all sorts of things that we were never able to tell before. So, for example, before the internet, for example, if you advertised in a newspaper or a magazine, right, that newspaper or magazine could probably tell you their subscription, i.e. how many copies they sold, right? But they couldn't tell you how many people actually saw the page that your ad or your article was on. And similarly, if you're advertising on TV or etc., same thing, right? They can tell you how many people maybe watched the program, but they can't tell you how many people were actually in the room where the TV was and how many people didn't, turn it off and go and have a cup of tea while the ads were playing, etc. So all of a sudden, we were able to learn a whole lot more about our visitors and who they are and what they're doing, and hopefully still in a way that protects and respects their privacy. But it's very, very interesting. And with that information, you can do all sorts of things. You can learn at a level that allows you to do things differently. That's really exciting, or to me anyway.
Yeah.
So even in the early days of analytics just beginning, I was hooked.
I'm really glad for the internet, honestly, because before the internet, there was literally no way one could know. There are so many data that really influences marketing decisions compared to the traditional days. The follow-up question as regarding that is, you decided to focus on helping businesses in your own terms find hidden gems in their analytics, right? What led to that decision?
Well, when I say hidden gems, I help them to interpret their analytics overall. So it's not only kind of finding what I call the hidden gems. And what I mean by that is things that you couldn't possibly know without looking at the analytics and looking at the data. But of course, we do look at the analytics overall to see what's going on and what's working with the site, what's not working with the site. For example, if you're paying for advertising, then you're spending money. So you really want to know whether or not that spend is paying off, right? If the people that are coming from the ads that you're placing, wherever you're putting them, are actually, looking at your content, interacting with you, engage with you, and ultimately, hopefully buying your stuff or doing whatever it is that you want them to do.
Yeah.
So it's not just one thing. It's a lot of things that you can do that just help you understand a whole lot better about what's going on and what you need to do differently and what you need to dig into a bit more carefully.
Yeah. You worked with over 500 clients.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I want to ask, I think this one will be quite easy. What's one common mistake you see business owners and content creators making?
Well, I think the problem is for many people, analytics is overwhelming and therefore quite intimidating. So, a lot of businesses run Google Analytics, right? It's free and so on. If you log into that space, you're going to see a whole load of numbers and charts and graphs, and there's tons of it. I think by default, there's like over 140 different reports or even more. And it's extremely easy to just feel totally overwhelmed really quickly. And when you feel totally overwhelmed, what do? You kind of take a quick look, decide that things are probably okay, and walk away because you're overwhelmed and you don't know what to do and where to start. And because of that, you actually don't do anything particularly sensible with your analytics at all. And anybody out there who's kind of listening to this going, I kind of relate to that, it's nothing to be embarrassed about in my book, because it is intimidating and it isn't easy to get to grips with. Therefore, what you have to do is to have a really good idea about your own business and what you think your own business should be doing, because the only way to make any sense of this, whether you do it yourself or whether you work with somebody who knows what they're looking at, is to say, this is what I think should be happening, and then say, is it happening, right? And if it's not happening, or not enough of it is happening, then let's try and figure out what's going wrong and what we need to do differently so that it will work better. But if you just try to sort of look at the numbers without any real starting point and say, what do these numbers tell me? You're going to be completely confused and overwhelmed potentially, and it's really not a good way to approach it.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, most people don't even know what they should be looking at in the analytics, what metrics is important to them, depending on what they're seeking to achieve.
Right. So the other big mistake that a lot of people make is to look at either meaningless analytics. And when I say meaningless, we call them vanity metrics. So, another very easy thing to do to get out of doing any sort of in-depth work is to say something like, so we got more visitors this week than we did last week, and therefore we must be doing it right, and therefore we're going to walk away. I mean, in other words, we don't need to investigate anything more closely, because clearly it's working, because we got more of something than we did last week. And that's, obviously pretty simplistic, because if you got tons more visitors this week than you did last week, but none of them did the things you want them to do on your site, you're still no further down the road in terms of growing your business.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you could maybe last week you had visitors that spent maybe 5, 7, 8 minutes on your site. And then now you're having visitors that don't even spend up to 40 seconds on your site. They just leave immediately, they land on the site.
Right. Right. So then the question is, okay, so something is off now. In that situation, if it's literally that big of a change, like week by week, you would want to know what's different about our marketing. Did we advertise in a different place that got us people that weren't as well qualified for what we do? Did we send out a newsletter, or did we not send out a newsletter, and that kind of stuff? So what's different? And what's different about the visitors that we got? Maybe it's where they came from. Maybe it's what landing, what was the content that they first saw on your site. It could be all sorts of things. But what you want to start doing is not to walk away, but to start really digging in and saying, okay, so what do we need to know about what's causing this anomaly, so that, if it's a good anomaly, i.e. we got more conversions this week than we did before, we want to know, well, how's that, like what's working well that we need to do more of. And if things are not going so well, then obviously you want to know, what's changed about the quality of the visitors or the quality of the content, and that we need to put right.
Yeah. One of the things you emphasize is speaking in plain English rather than techie jargon. Why do you think that is important when discussing analytics?
Well, because otherwise you and I will be sitting here having a conversation about custom dimensions. Do you know what a custom dimension is?
Hmm. I
You don't
have
know.
no
Okay, so
idea.
you can just say you don't know what a custom dimension is, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know what
Okay.
it is.
You're running your own business. Do you care what a custom dimension is? No, probably not. I mean, if you do, that's lovely. But a lot of business owners don't, right? Because what they care about, what you probably care about, is what do I need to know to run my business better? And that's a really important business question for you. How the technology of getting to that with all the different analytics bits and pieces, unless you're really into it, is not something that I think you should have to know. And so one of the things that I do know about, there's lots and lots of really good material online if you want to learn analytics, and if you want to learn how to work with the reports and really how to get into it. It's a tremendous amount, and it's very, very good. But if you don't, if you just want to understand, what's it about? Why should I care? What do I need to know as a business owner? It's much more difficult to get information that doesn't get very techy very quickly. And so that's my goal. In fact, I'm currently writing a book, which I hope will be out quite soon, in the next couple of months. But, it's to create material for business owners so that I talk to business owners in business terms without going into all these. I mean, there's a huge amount of jargon in analytics, right? If you really get into it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, I don't know how my accountant does my taxes. I don't want to know. I don't want to learn how to do taxes, right? I just want to know that what I need to know about my business. So, are there things that I need to do in my business differently based on my tax position? And that's what I want my accountant to explain to me. right? So
Yeah.
it's a similar kind of thing here.
Yeah. Quickly, I just want you to like share a story about, you work with a lot, you worked with over 500 clients. What would you say is one of your favorite instance where you saw a surprising insight that kind of like changed their business strategy completely?
Yeah. So a while ago, so this is actually a story about a lawyer, but she was a solo practitioner, and she was a lawyer here in California, and she did not practice litigation. She was an employment law specialist. And what she did was workshops for Silicon Valley companies around how to, stay out of court, essentially, how to create a fair workplace so that they weren't facing a lot of, sexual harassment suits and that kind of stuff, right? So she
Yeah.
would go in and do workshops for them so that employees would know how to, treat each other with respect and avoid kind of these situations. And so I'm telling this story because it will become relevant to your audience, hopefully. So she had a huge amount of material on her website because when you're selling yourself as an expert, which maybe some of your audience are, one of the things you've got to do is establish that you're that expert, right? You've got to share what you know. And so she had a huge amount of legal employment law information on her website. And because of she had so much of that, she had a search engine. And then we started looking at the search terms that people put into the search engine that was on her site. So now we're not talking about Google search, we're talking about her actual website having a search engine of its own to index her content. Okay, so for any of your listeners who have a lot of content on their site, this is a really good thing to do is build in a search engine that helps people to find all products, same thing, right? A lot of different products on your site. You've got to have a search function to help people find them. And the thing about that search function is it is absolute gold dust, because then you can start tracking what is it that people look for, and that tells you huge amounts about your audience. It tells you what they expect from you, and it gives you ideas for new products and services. So in this case, we noticed that there were lots and lots of searches that were clearly from employees who thought that maybe they were being sexually harassed at work, or that they had been unfairly terminated or something like that, where they're coming to her website looking for legal advice. And that's absolutely not her target market, right? Because she works with the big employers in Silicon Valley doing corporate workshops, and she
Yeah.
doesn't do litigation. But there were so many of these searches that we said, wait a minute. And we ended up creating a whole set of ebooks. Right. So an ebook is nothing mysterious. It's basically a PDF, and you put it behind, you can get software that people put in their credit card, and then they can get access to download the PDF file, right? So it's technically not a complicated thing to do. But we
Yeah.
created a number of ebooks for things like, I think I'm being sexually harassed, what can I do? Or I think I've been accused of sexual harassment, what should I do? Or I think I've been unfairly terminated, what should I do? Or I think I should be getting overtime and I'm not, and so on, right? And these were targeted at employees to give them a little bit of legal advice on the basis that often what you think of as a legal case is not. And so before you go and actually spend a lot more money than, we had them priced at some sort of impulse buy price for the US, like $14.99 or something like that, right?
Yeah.
You can get an indication because it was a checklist, so it went through a series of questions, gave them a response based on their questions. You can get an idea of whether or not you should go and see a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so obviously it was covered in disclaimers because it's not official. I mean, it's an indication, it's not intended as legal advice.
Yeah.
But the thing that was amazing was that these things started to sell. And we did a couple more manuals for companies that were smaller that couldn't afford to hire her. And of course, law in the US is different in different states, but there's some principles that apply in general.
Yeah.
So we could make them generic enough to be not just applicable to California. And these things started to sell and ended up making several $1,000s a month, without any fulfillment, because once you've set up the thing that does the download, it's all automatic.
Yeah.
Gives access to the file. Exactly. It's digital.
Yeah.
And so it runs itself. And again, it shows her expertise. So, what I'm doing here in terms of telling the story is to say to any of your listeners, if you have expertise that you can package in that way and sell, and you've got an idea that there's a market for it. We knew there was a market for it that was coming to her website based on looking at the traffic in the search engine, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that you can do.
I love that story, and thank you so much for sharing. Yeah.
Yeah, I really hope that maybe somebody out there that's listening is going, huh? Because, I love listening to people going, huh, because it means they're going, maybe I should think about that.
I'm thinking about it. Like, you don't even have to hope. I'm saying hi.
Right.
I'm thinking about it. Like, of course, I know some people are thinking about it, but I am thinking about it and I'm saying, thank you so much. Yeah. The next question I want to ask is, many content creators, earlier on, you did make a hint about it when you were answering another question I asked, but many content creators, they focus on vanity metrics like likes, views, and then on the website aspects, they look at, okay, I got a ton of visitors, or my visitors are increasing. Why is that a mistake?
Well, because typically, unless, once or twice I've worked for a non-profit organization that maybe is trying to promote a mission or a message. And if that's the case, then potentially, yeah, you really do want to know how many people saw a page, literally how many people saw it. In general, though, you want them to go a step further than just seeing your stuff. You're going to want them to do something like sign up to your newsletter or buy something from you or whatever it is that your website's trying to do. So simply going on the number of people who saw your stuff isn't that helpful or sophisticated, because you want to go to the, and then what? And then what did they do? Right? What happened? Because otherwise you could have people seeing your stuff all day and nothing would happen and your business would go nowhere. Right. So it's like, it's a nice start. I mean, obviously, if you've got no traffic, then we've got a problem as well. But once you're starting to get traffic, you really want to get to the next level, which is okay. And then what?
Yeah, I like that. Like, we have to go back to the drawing board and ask ourselves, like, what are we seeking to achieve? What's the essence of everything we are doing in the first place? Yeah.
Because as I think you said it earlier, didn't you? What's the point of measuring?
Yeah.
And what's the point of measuring if you're not going to do something about it?
Yeah. Yeah. I think, yeah, that's true. What gets measured gets improved. And so if you're measuring and you're not using what you're getting from measurement to improve, it's like, what's the use? Yeah. One of the things I want us to do now is, I would love for you to answer this question with scenarios, right? One of the biggest problem, I think, is not even the analytics itself. It's people don't even know the kind of metrics that are important to them, right? So could you tell me, give maybe one or two common online businesses, and then give what, like, okay, let me break down the question so that it's not too up. Okay, could you give an example of a business, right? Tell us their business goals, right? And then you tell us the metrics that connect to those business goals. Does the question make sense?
Yeah. Now, obviously, I'm not going to tell you a real business because, well, I mean, and that's something to really be clear about, is that these analytics tend to be very confidential, right?
No,
I
no, no.
mean, most
I'm not
businesses, yeah.
a podcaster, but let's say I'm a podcaster who the kind of podcast I do is for educational purpose to drive clients to my business, right? And if people come to my website, the question I'm asking are based on my goals that I just told you about, right? What are some of the metrics I should be looking for in my analytics dashboard that will actually serve my goals? Does it
Oh,
make sense
right.
now?
Yes. So, I mean,
Okay.
podcasts. Okay. So, if you're doing a podcast, then one of the first things you want to do is notice the success of the podcast, right? So, how many people start listening to the podcast?
Okay.
But then what you might want to do is also listen to how many people, or look at rather, how much of each podcast do people actually listen to? And you can get that in analytics now. So, I mean, do you in fact have a podcast? And I mean, I've seen this, unfortunately. Quite a few people might start listening, but they drop off quite rapidly because the content isn't holding them.
Yeah.
So by the time you get to the end of the podcast, and especially the bit where you might be saying, and thank you for listening, and here's my offer, and here's what I do, and stuff like that, there's nobody actually listening anymore. So nobody gets to hear it.
Yeah.
So, you need to understand the engagement rates for your podcast. And, for different types of podcasts, like if you have some different types of guests or some different types of topics, it's going to be useful to start seeing patterns of whether there are certain types of guests or topics or whatever that engage your audience more. And, similarly, for example, you might look at in terms of engagement and content consumption, is there a sweet spot in terms of length? Like, have we now been going on for too long and people are starting to tune out because they've had enough now?
Yeah.
Right. So I don't know if you already know this, but what turns out to be the optimal length for your audience of a podcast, or when do they start to sort of tune out of it?
It's about, it's about
And
40.
then,
Yeah, I know. It's after some time I realized it's a rhetorical question. So
but
yeah, I got
then, you also, if your podcast includes a call to action, like if there's something you want people to do as a result of hearing the podcast, then you're going to want to monitor, obviously, excuse me, how successful that is in terms of getting them to do what you want. So, again, it's essentially whatever you're trying to measure, the principle is going to be, what is it you're trying to do? What's the outcome you're looking for? What's the quality of engagement? And what's the quality of outcomes that it generates?
yeah. Okay. I'm going to take a question a step further now. Do you have like a framework or a system that anyone can possibly use to take any goal or results that they desire in business, right? And then just connect it to their analytics and easily say, okay, this is what I should pay attention. This is what I should ignore.
I would really hesitate to answer that question in a very generic way, because I do think that every website is its own business, it's its own situation.
Mm.
And I often find there's a load of generic advice out there. And there are often times when I see generic advice and somebody says, oh, but, I've heard that. And it just doesn't apply in their situation. So, I really kind of hesitate to say, oh, everybody should do this, because, I'd like to work situation by situation.
I get it. I understand it. Like there's so certain things that might be important to one business. So on another business, it might not be significant, right?
But what we are saying, to make this point really, really clear, is you've got to know your own business. You've got to know what it is you're trying to do.
Yeah.
And then you need to start asking questions based on that. So, here's what we expect to happen. Here's the type of visitors we're trying to attract. Is this what's working, what's not working?
Yeah. Funny thing is that it's a good thing you shared that story earlier on about your clients, because one of the questions I wanted to even ask you was, can analytics help creators uncover new revenue opportunities they weren't even considering, right? And then you went on to share that story, and it was the perfect answer to the question.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah,
even before I asked it.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yes. And I have other stories. I mean, that's not an isolated story. There are certainly other examples of that. In fact, I'm currently writing a book, and there'll be a lot more stories in my new
yeah,
book about that kind of stuff. So, that's why, again, it's worth looking at the analytics, because you can start to get ideas and insights that are going to help you really grow your business.
yeah. I mean, recently, I don't know if you've noticed, Google Analytics 4, they changed it from the normal traditional Google Analytics. And this new Google Analytics, it's for some reason, it's just, well, I don't know the word to use, but it has a steeper learning curve compared to the previous one.
And yeah, well, there are a lot of people who don't like it. I use it quite a lot. And what I would say is, I mean, am I happy with it all? No. The interface certainly has a lot that could be improved, but it is gradually getting better. I mean, there are places where you can give feedback to Google, and it does have some very, very powerful features that the previous version didn't have, if you know how to take advantage of them. And so again, what you can do if you don't want to get to grips with this and yourself and have to, if it's not your thing, but if you can find somebody that you can even hire to sort of set you up with a starting point, because it does usually need a bit of customization. I mean, out of the box, it's not going to do everything you want it to do. And some of the default settings are a little strange, in my opinion.
Yeah,
But, once you get it working for you, there's a lot that you can tell that, again, as I said, is certainly more advanced than some of the stuff that you used to be able to do with Universal.
yeah. Earlier on, why you shared the story of the lawyer, one of the things you talked about was having a search functionality on your website. Like it's very important.
Right. Yes. Yes.
Are there
Because
other
yeah. Go ahead.
Are there other hidden gems, like hidden gems content creators should like look for in their websites and content data?
You mean, are there other?
Yeah, like you talk about the search functionality, like and the way you explained it of how they could see so much data about their audience. What other things could they look for on their websites, right? so that they could also learn from?
Well, you can learn a lot from which pages people go to, which pages people don't go to, maybe something
Mm,
about the order in which they do things. I mean, calls to action are really, really important. And if somebody can't figure out what to do next on your website, in my experience, almost certainly they won't do anything that you want them to do and they might just leave. So it's extremely important to provide, to direct people proactively to where you want them to go with really clear calls to action and things that you want them to do.
yeah.
And then, call to action is, and it should be sort of more exciting than click here, but, what are they going to get when they click on this link? And then again, once you've done that and you kind of optimized showing people around and what to do next, then you can start saying, okay, how's this working out? And are people now clicking through the site much more the way I want them to? Or, are people still kind of doing what they think they should do and it's not what I need?
I mean, I think one of the things I see with analytics is, especially if someone is just starting out and they're growing, is we tend to spend, and this is me speaking from my own experience right now, we tend to spend a lot of time looking at the analytics, right? And it's not like there's anything bad with looking at analytics, but just that certain types of analytics take time for you to see any measurable improvements. At the end of the day, we are wasting precious time looking at the analytics. So for me, I want to ask, like, how often should we be looking at the analytics? Right? For a medium, not a very big business, like a small, medium business.
Well, it depends what you've got going on. I mean, if you've just launched a new website or a new feature or a new product, or, if your website is very mission critical to your business, then you're going to want to obviously monitor what's going on pretty frequently. If your website is more of a sort of a support to your business because it explains who you are and maybe showcases your expertise a bit, but it's not, maybe it generates leads, but or it doesn't, it's not your direct selling, you might want to look at it a bit less, and those things can change based on whether you've got an immediate problem or an immediate thing that you're working on or not. So you should be learning about me by now. I'm not a big fan of massive sort of you must do this rules of thumb kind of stuff, other than you must look at your analytics at some point because otherwise you don't know what's going on.
Yeah. The reason I'm asking is I'll give an example. If let's say I get in a day, I get maybe 10 to 20 persons visit my website, right? Now, of course, that's data, but it's not large enough data points for me to see significant and make concrete or certain decisions, right?
Right.
So for that case,
Yes,
I might
yes.
have to wait maybe like in a month to get enough data points to say, okay, this is what it stands for, compared to a site that is getting like 1,000 persons every day, right?
Yes, absolutely. So that's a very good point. But again, I mean, if your website is really important for growing your business, obviously you'd want to be doing something to start growing your traffic more anyway.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's true. Now that you've mentioned traffic, I feel obliged I should ask what's and I know this question is one of those questions that you tell me, I mean, it's peculiar to the business. What do you think should be like the number, like kind of like the minimum number people should strive to get for to their website in a month? Visitors, of course.
Right. And again, I have no idea. But I would say that. I mean, one of the things that I also talk to business owners about is how often do you want people to come back to your website? Because it's the same kind of question. It depends on the nature of your business. So if your business is selling very, very high ticket items, maybe B2B, where, and that may not be your audience right now, but where it's not the sort of thing that people buy every day or even every year,
Yeah.
you're not going to expect people to come to your website a lot, the same people, unless they're coming there for other things like training and support and so on, or because you have a user community or something. Whereas if you're a shopping site or a food ordering site, for example, you might expect or hope that your regular customers are going to come to you at least every week and maybe more than once a week, right? So you can see where I'm going with this. The number of visitors where you would say this is my website's doing well does really depend on the nature of the site and your visitors and what they're looking for and how often they need that information or that access.
Okay. Thank you very much. But are there free tools creators can use to better understand their audience?
Free, limited.
Not necessarily free, but tools?
Well, for example, there are a lot of people that are quite concerned about privacy issues with Google. So in Europe, for example, there are other packages, other tools that do very well, things like Matemo and so on. And I don't want to go through a whole list of tools here, but yes, most of them do tend to have some sort of nominal fee. So it depends what you need. There are some companies that don't want to work with Google because of their privacy concerns, because they are in businesses that are really sensitive to privacy issues, such as healthcare.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yes, there are other tools that you can certainly, and some of the packages like Shopify and so on will have their own built-in analytics. Often it depends what you're getting and what you're doing, but they're not as sophisticated as Google Analytics, but they're fine for basic starting numbers and so on.
Yeah. Well, a question I want to ask is, I think the whole idea of analytics is to understand the audience, right? Yeah. Is there any tool that can help me see how the user is behaving on like what they click, how they scroll and everything?
Yes. So Microsoft actually has a very nice tool there that interfaces with Google Analytics, and it's called Clarity.
Okay.
Clarity. And that again is free, and you can put it onto your website. And as I say, you can actually hook it up with Google Analytics, and it will record exactly screen sessions. So it will record a visitor. You can see exactly where they're putting their mouse, where they're scrolling, where they fill in forms. Now, it doesn't give you, if they fill in a form, it will obscure what they type for privacy reasons.
Of course, if it's your website, you see what's the field in the form on the back end.
Right. Yeah, I mean, yeah, but the analyst won't see it. But yes, so the answer to that is yes, and it's a great question because it's absolutely a tool or something like it. There are other tools, like Hotjar. Sorry,
Hotjar.
yeah, Hotjar or HubSpot. Sorry,
Yeah.
that will do stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, now the part I want to ask now is for a lot of persons, analytics is one of those things that it's overwhelming. It's not exactly fun, except of course it's you that is doing it, which you said earlier on, like it delights you, right? Earlier on, you talked about one of the surest way to make it less overwhelming is to give it to someone who's like pretty good at it, right? But let's say I can't afford to hire or outsource it to someone else. How can I make it less overwhelming for me?
Well, I mean, as I say, there are lots and lots of good courses online. As I said, I'm also writing a book, which will hopefully be out in a couple of months, that will help you. It's designed to help you think about how to approach all this as a business owner
I'd
without the
love to
technology.
to
And
have you
then,
on the podcast when the book is
yeah,
out.
I will let you know. But if you want to get into it a bit more technically, you can. But if you have a website, even if you hire somebody to just set you up, make sure that you've got things properly established, it's worth thinking about that just so you know you're on the right track and maybe not try to figure it out yourself. You always have to balance the cost of trying to figure it out yourself and possibly getting it, well, maybe not wrong, but not optimal, against the opportunity cost of that, against the cost of having somebody at least look at it for you. So if you're serious about your business, you got to invest to some level, because if you spent the time and money to make the site, then you would want to know how it's performing for you.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Like, I love the stories you shared and the tips and the tools and everything. I'm literally having a lot of aha moments of things I could
Great,
possibly do
great,
on my
great.
website. Yeah.
Excellent.
I'd love for us to play a fun little game. It's not going to be long because I don't even know most of the business terms. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to mention a business term, and you mention a couple of metrics that would connect to that business term. I don't know if you understand.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. And I know it's not going to be perfect. So for those that are listening at home, disclaimer: this is not again, as you will always say, it's peculiar to your business.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. The first one is revenue.
How do you derive revenue, right? I mean, it's pretty obvious. So, yeah, depending on how you make revenue, you want to know how that's working. If you're selling stuff directly, what's going on. Are people buying stuff? If not, what's the conversion rate, right? That kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, great.
Growth is about how much more of something I want to do did I do in whatever time period, as opposed to the last time period. In terms of what did it cost? What was my ROI, as opposed to just did I get more? Was the growth good? That kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I think that pretty much is all I know about business terms. So we just stop there. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Where can listeners connect with you and learn more about what you do?
Thatwin.com. So that's like websites plural, that win. And on that website, you can find a free ebook, which gives you some stories like the one I told you about my lawyer friend, but some other stories as well, which are just designed to sort of give you some inspiration. Like this is things we found and what we were able to do with them, again, without any technology or without technical explanation and the charts and the graphs and the stuff like that, just to sort of inspire business owners to think, is this something that maybe I should check out because it could be relevant to me.
Yeah.
So that's on my website at websites.win.com, and I'm also always very happy to connect with people on LinkedIn.
Yeah. For those who might have forgotten, what's the name on LinkedIn?
So my name is Philippa Gamse. Hopefully that will be in the show notes.
Yeah, it will be. But
to the best of my knowledge, I'm the only person in the entire world with this name. So if you look me up, you will almost certainly find me.
So any other Philippa Gamse is a counterfeit?
Yes, but I don't think there are any.
Yeah, I wish I could say that. I'll probably have to check. Yeah, thank you so much for the podcast. I really had a blast with you.
Excellent. Thank you for the great questions.
Thank you so much for listening to another exciting episode of Wisdom Journey Podcast. If you found today's episode helpful, consider supporting the podcast by buying me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/wisdomhq. Every cup helps keep the episodes coming and supports the work that goes into making this show for content creators like you. Until next time, keep creating and stay consistent.